Hey friends, wishing you and yours a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We are getting closer and closer to the day in which we celebrate the birth of Jesus. So today I want to share some thoughts with you on 1 Samuel 25. This is a chapter in which, for so long, having been steady, having been patient, having long suffered, in the wilderness, on the hunt from King Saul, David goes absolutely nuts. He just loses the plot. And sometimes when you're reading the Bible and you just think you know somebody and then they do or say something and you think it's weird, you can almost feel a sense of betrayal, like, I thought you were someone else. But I remember a number of years ago, my school shut unexpectedly halfway through the day. Maybe there was a power outage or water outage or something. And I remember my colleague said to me, hey, would you like to go see the new Lion King movie? You know, the live action one that was called live action, but it was just CGI. And I thought, yeah, okay, whatever, sure. So we're working in North Frederick Street in Dublin. And then you have to walk through Parnell Square. And then onto O'Connell Street, and that's where the Savoy Cinema was, and that's where we were going to go. So as we were walking toward the cinema, we were still in North Frederick Street. We were about 100 meters from the school building, maybe. There was a homeless man sitting on the ground on the side of the road. So, you know, I looked at him and he looked at me, he smiled pitiably, and I felt a bit of compassion for him. And next thing, this absolute tank of a woman comes along. And I remember in the moment, the only thing I could think of was Jigglypuff. You know that Pokemon? Jigglypuff, Jigglypuff. Yeah, her. And you know, she had messy blonde hair, pallid skin. She would blend in, you know, with white sand on a beach. She was wearing a vibrant pink Jeremy Kyle tracksuit. And next thing, she just walks right up, if you could even call this action walking. It was all shaking, it was all going on. Up to the homeless man. So he was holding a sign saying, please help me, I'm homeless. And he had a little hat with a couple euros in it in front of him. She pulled the sign from his hands and began running away. Began running all the way down Frederick Street, down Parnell Street, down O'Connell Street. And I kind of looked at my friend, and then my friend looked at me, and I was like, did that just happen? I was like, how rude, how wicked. Ugh. And the next thing I thought was, did she know something I didn't know? Is this guy a faker? Because in Dublin city centre, you see a lot of fakers. You know, they're all homeless, and 80% of them are wearing €150 runners and sports jackets. And I just thought to myself, you know what? I actually think this is legit. I just looked at the man for some reassurance or some reaction, and he just shrugged. He just looked really sad. And the next thing that crossed my mind was Captain America. You know, Chris Evans, Captain America, Marvel Cinematic Universe, that version, not the comic book version. And I just twiddled my imaginary WWCAD, what would Captain America do, bracelet. And I said, this will not stand. I'm pretty sure I actually yelled that. And next thing, I was running down the streets after this cow. And oh my goodness, the things that were coming out of my mouth. I was like, a plague upon your house! You are scum! You are everything wrong with society! I mean, oh my goodness. Other people looking obviously didn't have a bold notion what had just happened, and they probably thought, what is this guy's problem with his chick? And eventually, outside the Savoy Cinema, I caught up with her. And I reached out like Harry Potter, grabbing the golden snitch, and I grabbed the sign with one hand, and then two hands. And I said, let go of it, you filth. And she was like, no, I will not let go! Which surprised me. I actually thought she would have been so intimidated she would have. But this woman had a spirit of pride. And as I was wrestling free, now here's the thing, I absolutely could have gotten it back. Okay, I mean, I was strong enough to do it. All I had to do was actually move my hands a couple inches more, and I would have had the main hold of it. I would have had the lion's share, I would have taken it back. I was stronger than she was. I could have resorted to any method of getting it back. And then there came a point. Almost like an out-of-body experience. You know, when time just like slows down? And it was like there was a me watching this madman who looked like me and sounded like me, but was behaving very uncharacteristically for me in a tussling match for the sign. And calm, chilled, steady, relaxed me just said, "What are you doing? How far are you going to go to get this sign? I mean, seriously, have you thought this through? If you does not let go in the next 10 seconds, what is your follow-up?" Hello. And at this point, the physically wrestling me kind of caught up. And I let go. I just said, God, I can see this through to completion, but that's not a place I want to go. And then this Jigglypuff, ran in front of traffic with the sign and so on and so forth. Oh, I was livid. I was disgusted. My face was red. Steaming was coming from my ears. I was taking those deep, bull about to charge and stampede breaths. And my friend from work caught up with me and stood back from a very safe distance and was like, "Brendan, are you okay?" And I said, "No! Let's go see the movie." So she walked, I stormed into the cinema lobby. And, she got the tickets. I wasn't in the right mind to talk to anybody behind any counter that day. And we went up the stairs to the screen. And I was a bit surprised that they left the lights turned on during the trailers. And then, the movie began and, it's the circle of life. And the lights were still on in the screen. I thought, this is an absolute disgrace. And I was livid about that as well. So we were sitting in the very back row. I got up, walked down the stairs. I was like, this is not okay. We're paying for the full movie experience. And then they came and literally in the screen itself was the light switch. I didn't actually have to go tell anybody who worked there. So they followed me in and they were like, click. And then I went back to my seat and my friend was like, "Thank you, Brendan. Don't talk to me." I was huffing and puffing. I don't know what happened in that movie. I know there was a scene where a bit of dung got rolled up into a bowl or some nonsense for way too long. I remember Beyonce had a solo for some ridiculous reason that could not actually be justified. I don't know what happened. I went in, the lights got turned off eventually, and it ended. That's the reality. And when it was over, my friend was like, "Wow, that was amazing." Because we were kind of, cinema hopping, watching all the Disney remakes. Aladdin was particularly good until the end. And she was like, "Did you enjoy it? What'd you think?" And my only response was, "I should have gotten that sign back." I was livid. So we came out of the cinema, and normally, we might go for dinner or for some cheeky junk food or something. And she was like, "I'm just gonna go home," and I said, "As will I. I hate this city." So I turned the corner, hopped on the bus, and while sitting on the bus, I just said, "God, I cannot carry this with me into tomorrow. In fact, I do not want to carry this anger home." I said, "How did I get here? What happened? Why do I feel this way?" And next thing, the Lord took me back. A day beforehand, someone else, another woman with pallid skin and blonde hair, had spoken to me very rudely, had been very, very disgusting and despicable. And the Lord said, "Transference. You took the pain, the issue, and the grief from that instance, and you transferred them onto this instance. So today you're like, I'm Captain America. I'm going to save the small person, but you weren't. That was a disguise. That was a lie. You're actually trying to vindicate yourself. You were trying to stand up for yourself. But you were standing up for yourself in a situation where you had not been the victim. The victimizer in this one was not the aggressor yesterday. Two very different situations. But there was projection and there was transference. You projected yourself being vulnerable on the homeless man, and you transferred your offence from yesterday's shrew to this one. And it was a humbling moment. It was. So I said nothing to anyone for a couple of days. And then I told one of my friends, then the following Sunday, we're at church. She was like, how are you? And I couldn't keep a straight face as I was telling it. I just felt bonkers. And he just laughed and laughed and laughed. And at the end he asked, well, how was the homeless man? And my response was, how would I know? And he asked, well, I mean, you work in an English school, you've got tons of cardboard and paper. Did you give him a new sign to make? Did you give him cardboard to make a new sign? And I said, well, why would I do that? And he said, well, you use board markers on your board every day. Did you give him a marker even? On what grounds? And then he asked me, did you give the guy any money? And I was like, good heavens, what for? And that's how you know there's been projection and transference. I didn't give a toss about the homeless man. It was all about my own offence. Why do I say that? Because that is just not me. I'm not saying I've never been in a sticky situation before, or a hairy one, or a violent one. I have 2 or 3 many times. I probably will be again in the future. But why I say this is chasing after someone and berating her and belittling her at the top of my lungs and calling her a skank and a Pokemon and all this nonsense. No, that's not me. And at 1 Samuel 25, we see David behave similarly uncharacteristically, where he sends his shepherds to a man called Nabal's home. And Nabal's very rich, and David and his men living in the wilderness of En-Gedi have been protecting Nabal's shepherds and flock for quite some time. And there's a festival coming up. David wants to offer an animal sacrifice, so he says, hey, guys, go ask Nabal if he'll do us a solid, if he'll be good to us, as we've been good to him and his men. And Nabal absolutely strips off them. He is morally bankrupt. His name means fool, which for us, is an idiot or an idiot. In Hebrew, a fool is someone who is morally bankrupt. Someone who's wicked, someone who despises what's good. It's a very strong criticism in Hebrew. And he basically says, oh, your master David is just a runaway. Every slave's running away from his master today. Every servant's on the run. They've all gotten notions. They're too big for their boots. Screw your leader, David. And David blows a gasket. This guy has been betrayed by his father-in-law, by his wife, by the men he used to lead, by the young man in the country, by people that he is actually protected. He's public enemy number 1 in the nation. The whole nation knows his name, and most of them probably don't like him, or if they've heard lies, they're not actually counteracting the lies. At some level, they're probably in belief or in agreement with the lies. And it's this particular instance. Just this one random guy. That's the straw that breaks the camel's back. That's what sends David running down O'Connell Street, calling this woman a shrew, and willing to poleaxe her just to get a sign back. And the servants go and they tell Nabal's wife Abigail, who's a beautiful woman, a very intelligent woman, Her name means my father is joy, or my father's joy, the joy of my father. And she is a prophetess. She knows that there is a kingly anointing on David's life. And she says this will not stand, not a chance. So David and his mighty men are running down a valley towards her house to absolutely enact revenge and payback, and she just says, no. So she gets wine, she gets bread, she gets cakes, and then she gets sheep. She hops onto a donkey, and she says, leave it to me. So as David's men are charging downhill, she comes up before them. One woman in front of 400 men, and she gets off the donkey, and she bows down before him in a posture of humility and submission. And she says, my husband's name is Nabal. Nabal means fool. Folly goes with him wherever he goes. He is an idiot. He is wicked. But you are not. You are the Lord's anointed. The Lord has a plan for your life. A plan that you will step into. The plans of God of your life will be fulfilled. And you will not look back and find that there is innocent bloodshed on your hands. Nabal was an idiot. She was innocent. The servants were all innocent. Most people in the house were innocent. And she said, listen, I'm going to give you the bread. I'm going to give you the wine. I'm going to give you everything that I came with on the donkey. But actually, when you step into the plans that God has for you, when you step into the position God has for you, remember me. Remember this moment. Remember this day. And she even goes on to say that she would be willing to wash the feet of all of David's men. And David is humbled. He's like, oh my goodness, you're so amazing. Thank you so much. I just was about to do something crazy. And he and his men bugger off. The threat passes. Nabal doesn't know any of this is happening. He is at home, blind, drunk. So he finally falls asleep. He sleeps it off. And when he wakes up, probably with a hangover, Abigail tells him, listen, you missed out on a lot yesterday. Let me fill you in. And he is so absolutely repulsed by this that his heart turns to stone. And kind of sounds like he had a heart attack, to be honest. He just got totally stiffened, and within 10 days, he was dead. And at that point, David sends some of his servants to the house, not to express their condolences, not to pay their respects, not to say, oh, he looks so handsome, standing beside the corpse in the coffin. No, they go and they say, David would like you to be his wife. David would really like to marry you. You'd be amazing. You'd be a great addition to his family. And she accepts. She and her maidservants go and meet him. And, you know, this is not an upgrade for David, materially. He doesn't move into her house, or the house Nabal built. He doesn't become rich overnight. He doesn't suddenly have all these servants working for him, and thousands of animals. He doesn't suddenly have hundreds of thousands of euros in the bank. No, it's actually a downgrade for her. She actually walks away from all of that material wealth to spend time with him. She walks away from security to live with him. She walks away from what's sure or what's economically certain to be with him. She walks away from it all to take up the adventure that God had for David. The risk, the threat, to be on the lam, to be on the run from a wicked king. And it's just a really, really amazing story. But what I love about it so much is it is an amazing picture of the love of God, where all people through sin, all people through their folly, all people through their lack of wisdom, all people through their foolishness, have the wrath of God rigged against them. Yes, it's been satisfied for us by the cross of Jesus, but if someone lives in their sin, they die in their sin, And then they go to a dimension called hell where they die to die forever. Until they get fire, which is even worse. But while the wrath was coming, while the judgment was coming, Abigail came on a horse. Jesus. Just like Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey when all the cloaks, the palm branches were being thrown before him. Abigail shows us Jesus. And then she got off and she bowed before David and his men. That was Jesus becoming the most humble man ever to live. We're told in the Bible that Moses was the most humble man up to that point. Jesus was more humble. He humbled himself even unto death, even death on a cross. And then we have how she said, I'll wash all your men's feet. The most famous foot wash in the Bible was the Last Supper, when Jesus washed his men's feet. And they had been walking through the streets of Israel, of Jerusalem, during the Passover event, when people would have been bringing animals with them for the animal sacrifice. And, you know, the animals crapping all over the place. I mean, there was probably a mighty stink in the room at the Last Supper. And yet Jesus looks at his 12 men, and none of them are taking the initiative to deal with the elephant in the room, the stench in the room. So Jesus wraps a towel around his waist, and he says, okay, I will. I'll deal with it. And he gets a bowl of water, and he washes all their feet one by one. And then she offers David bread and wine, and the bread represents the body of Jesus broken for us, to put our broken lives back together again. And the wine represents the blood of Jesus, poured out to make us clean, poured out to wash us clean, in Jesus' name. So Abigail is my favourite woman in the Bible. Such an amazing, marvellous picture of the love of Jesus. If you gleaned anything from that story, I'd love to hear it. Feel free to write it in the chat box below. And I wish you and yours a very Merry Christmas. All right. God bless, friends. Have a great day.